The spiderweb of links connecting peoples and economies around the world can spread ill as well as good. Even in the limited sphere of finance, the scale and connectedness of global capital markets makes a return to instability a frightening prospect. Stability has produced a situation in which we can no longer afford instability. At any given moment, the paradigm of modern finance and civilization as we know it can come to a grinding and violent end. Just like the collapse of the stock market in 2008 and the May 6, 2010 flash crash proved, when the big players won out, namely the institutional investors and hedge funds, they get out, and they get out fast. No longer do PE ratios, balance sheets, income statements, or dividend yields matter. Groupthink and following the herd takes precedent, and emotion rules the day, whether or not the risks are real or only perceived to be. This emotional, reactive response can and will collapse nations, economies, and civilizations around the world. Rome burned to the ground, and so will the United States of America. According to the medieval Dutch scholar Erasmus, every dog has his day. America, throughout its brief history as a loosely based democracy founded on the backs of slaves, has proven to be a nimble, aggressive, and exploitative nation. Find an advantage, secure an edge, natural resource, people, or economy, and then leverage that vulnerability until termination. Whether or not this is the near extinction of the American buffalo, the perpetual wars in the Middle East, the slaughter of Native Americans, the African slave trade, the US dollar collapse, the growing American police state, or the capitulation of the credit system itself doesn't matter. American ideology in many ways is, and has always been, a disease. Our political system is no different from the royal governance of kings and queens of 1,000 years ago, and they rule over the ignorant peasants of the land today. We pay with our blood, our tears, and they throw us scraps. We toil their land, work their factories, pay their taxes, fight and die in their wars. They borrow our children's futures in order to secure their own, and indulge themselves egregiously with power, sex, money, and idol worship. They are the ruling class. They give the masses that they profit from the illusion of freedom, independence, and free will, while all the while enslaving our minds, souls, and manipulating our behavior. They promise us the same wealth, fame, and fortune that they possess, yet reinforce our obedience and predictably control us with fear. We are Pavlov's dog. The world created by this dominant ruling class is completely interconnected and dependent on the stability of one thing, the system. This system has grown increasingly fragile, complex, and unstable in recent years, and can no longer afford a mistake, imperfection, inefficiency, or unexpected shock. It's as if the elites are playing the game of blackjack with our lives. Gyrations in the stock market or in the technologically based market system itself are dominated by personal, hyperspeed quant trading computer programs that trade securities in nanoseconds. What happens when on a particular insignificant day, all these interconnected computers and technology decides to place a sell order instead of buy? If the Romanian stock market collapses, for example, this triggers an event in France. This spreads to Italy, Spain, Portugal, Ireland, and then quickly moves to its remaining banking counterparties in the United States, Asia, Africa, and the rest of Europe in the blink of an eye. All nations collapse at once and can't and won't survive without the other. You see, failure is not an option anymore, but a condition of the system. In order for the system to stay intact, the one that they created and built to fail, all parties, countries, markets, and technologies must support each other indefinitely and grow in perpetuity. The US dollar must remain the world reserve currency forever. Policy action and intervention by central banks around the world must coalesce perfectly and must never fail. We must all accept these conditions as undeniable truths that never and cannot change. Don't ask questions, just obey, because the consequences of any error in policy or judgment could quickly spell catastrophe. But everything is changing. Population growth is exploding around the world, and the masses are moving to the cities at an unprecedented rate. This is putting great stress on our environment, natural resources, and encouraging the spread of new disease, aggressive mutations of the old, and the reinvigoration of others. According to UN statistics, the percentage of population living in cities increased by about 37% between 1950 and 1995, but the percentage of urban dwellers more than doubled in less developed nations during the same time period and tripled in the least developed. The UN estimates that by 2025, more than 5 billion people, 61% of the projected population, will live in cities. How will we support this inflow, an increasingly fragile and vulnerable infrastructure? What steps will the government and leadership take to manage sanitation, the prevention and spread of airborne diseases, and the increasingly dependent needs of a growing and aging baby boomer population? How long can the Ponzi scheme of modern finance and social welfare survive? If it's not already abundantly clear by now, it should be. Fraud and corruption runs wild at the highest level of government and politics. The revolving door between banker, corporate executive, and politician blurs. Criminals run wild on Wall Street and reinforce their counterparts in Washington, while corporate titans campaign for sweetheart deals, bailouts, lucrative bonuses, and campaign donations. The rest of us live in the real world, or at least we think we do, and are chained and enslaved by the illusion of a capitalist, just, and moral system. Yet clearly one does not exist. We are forced to pay taxes, die for our country, bail out the rich, and when things don't work out, we're told to look the other way. Insolvent global banks backed by an even more insolvent central banking system and privately owned Federal Reserve stimulates artificial demand through quantitative easing and other manipulative market measures. They print money out of thin air and inflate our debts, while at the same time, the bankers that brought down financial markets and destroyed the lives of millions of us continue to walk around the streets as free men. Millions of regular Johns and Janes suffer at the hands of the immoral and corrupt decision-making of a privileged few. We are foreclosed on, unfairly taxed, and being murdered by an increasingly brazen and reckless ruling class. The Kool-Aid drinking masses are beginning to wake up, their hearts and minds opening up to new possibilities and solutions. But this is not coming without a fight from the powerful tyrants still wielding power over us. We are beginning to organize, ask questions, and speak our minds freely, only to begin to understand and realize how deeply ingrained and carefully planned the deception has been all along. Propagandized, victimized, and raped by our attacker. We have been forced into believing that we have a choice and yet encouraged to submit. The control system clamps down on our Constitution, civil liberties, and freedoms that we once took for granted, but we have come to realize that they only exist in a vacuum. When exercised, explored, or utilized, we quickly find ourselves being beaten to a pulp, bloodied, and even killed by our masters. How long can this pot of water boil before overflowing and burning the cook?